How do you make one of the world's best cars even better? Well, when it comes to the Audi RS6, a cult classic fast station wagon that you can buy here in Australia and around the world, it comes down to adding the name performance to the end of its title, increasing the power, decreasing the 0 to 100 km/h acceleration time, adding a bunch of new mechanicals, and making a few cosmetic differences. Because frankly, there wasn't much that Audi needed to do to keep the RS6 relevant and fresh for 2024. And yet that's exactly what we have here, the updated Audi RS6 Performance. Now, this video is going to be a special one. We're going to check out the car as we usually do and drive it on road, but we're also going to take it from here in Sydney down to Phillip Island, where we'll track this car and see what an RS6 can really do in an environment that very few of its well-heeled buyers will ever actually take it to, a very fast racetrack. Before we get started, hit subscribe. Chasing cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Now, if you're wondering about the shades, it is super bright out there on hard concrete today, so you're just gonna have to forgive me. Also, pretty flash is this RS6. So this is, of course, the new performance trim. You actually can't get the regular RS6 anymore. The volume for this car is pretty small and niche here in Australia. So the regular RS6 has been discontinued. You can only get the performance. That's fine though, because this car takes very little away in terms of comfort or refinement. It's got a little bit less sound deadening. It's certainly not too loud. It just means you can hear the gorgeous exhaust a little bit better. In terms of the rest of the spec of our test car, a Ascari blue outside, we also have what's called the RS design package in blue, which is really nice. So you get a gorgeous blue carbon twill. I'm usually not a fan of carbon fiber on the interior of cars, but it works here in this RS6 and has a lovely blue fleck through it. You also get a blue stitch on the black Valcona leather seats and blue seat belts, which are pretty cool. So I reckon this car looks ace. It's also paired with the matte aluminium styling package and the matte aluminium silver wheels, which look really great. This is pretty much how I would do it. The only other option I would consider is there's a cognac interior trim, which I think would look even better. That doesn't come with blue seat belts, it comes with black seat belts. What about the rest of the package? Well, this is an Audi A6 as its basis point, and the RS6 is not crazy in terms of the alterations made to the underlying vehicle, and that's a good thing. This is a luxurious interior. You do have an Alcantara flat bottom steering wheel with paddle shifters for the torque converter auto. That's a little bit sporty, but the seats are comfy and supportive and relaxing to sit in. They've got heating and cooling, of course. That's all really good. Plenty of adjustment. A little bit more under thigh angle adjust would be good. In terms of material quality, leather on the dash and on the doors is appreciated. Some slightly dodgier plastics very low down, but you've really got to go looking for them. This is a luxury car and you can tell from inside. We do have the sensory package here, that's 11 grand. It lifts a few of the surface qualities and also adds a 19 speaker Bang & Olufsen stereo, which sounds fantastic. We've got small cup holders here, a shallow bin between the seats with wireless charging, smallish door bins, so storage space is a bit of a weak point, but on the whole, this feels bang up to date inside. Fresh, easy to use technology, wireless CarPlay, virtual cockpit, a climate screen down here that isn't too annoying, and it's all very well finished, which it should be at $250,000. There are a few things to point out in the back seat of the RS6 Performance, and the first one actually starts before you've even closed the door. That's because if you don't quite close it, the car will do it for you. This is one of those rare cars that has soft closed doors. So if your kids can't quite pull these relatively heavy doors all the way closed, they're not gonna have to constantly open and bang the door. It just soft closes. I mean, isn't that nice? That's the kind of feature that does set apart a luxury car. The second thing I want you to notice is that this is a family-sized vehicle. So if you're in the money and you're looking for a beautifully finished high-performance Audi, you don't have to go for the RSQ8 just because this vehicle is up to where that vehicle sits in terms of its space. I've got the front seat in my position. I'm 6 foot or 183 centimeters tall, and you can see that sitting behind myself. My legroom's excellent, tow room is very good, headroom is absolutely sufficient, even though this car is fitted with a double sunroof arrangement, which usually eats into headroom. So you will easily get 4 adults into this car, 2 kids back here, even tall ones are gonna be just fine. So please go the wagon. This car drives better, rides better, and is easier to see out of than an RSQ8, even though that is actually one of my favorite sports SUVs. In terms of amenities, we've got air vents, we've got 4 climate zones in this car, which is staggering. And also USB ports, another 12-volt socket, map pockets, and a flip-down armrest here with cup holders integrated in it. Very nice. A couple of child seats will fit back here without a problem either. So how are you going to tell the RS6 Performance apart from the outside? Well, the changes are subtle over the regular RS6, which has been discontinued in Australia. This new blue is one way of telling it. This is a sky blue, really lovely color. But the Performance also has a $700 optional matte aluminium styling package, which is fitted to this car around the windows, on the roof there, and also on the front and rear aprons. I think this looks fantastic. Better than a black pack, but also better than the bright aluminium pack on the previous RS6, which never looked quite right on this big metal piece down near the dual tailpipes. You do still get black RS6 and Audi badging front and rear, and this is a big wagon with a big power tailgate. Gets out of the way promptly, beautifully finished space, similarly practical to an SUV like an RS Q8, but of course far more fashionable. We also have the ability to lower that tailgate or lower it and lock the vehicle. When it comes to running costs, come on, it's a big over 2-ton super performance wagon. It's not going to be cheap. 5-year service plan costs just over $4,300. The fuel consumption's rated at 12 litres per 100 Ks. That's not too far off reality. I've been getting 15 in mixed driving with the 73 litre fuel tank. That is a fuel range of about 500 Ks. All right, heading out on track here at Phillip Island in the new RS6 Performance. This is the kind of track that you need for a big, powerful wagon like this. You wouldn't want to be on something too tight and technical. This car's just got too much power. So the power has been lifted over the standard RS6, which is no longer available, no longer on the market here in Australia. This is now the most powerful V8 that Audi has ever put in a production car. Still twin turbo and 4 litres in displacement. This engine's pretty tried and tested now, but like a whole bunch of other Volkswagen Group engines, it doesn't just stay static. Audi has adjusted this engine technically over many years, and what we see here is just the latest iteration of that. And what we're hearing here is more of it, more of the engine, more of the exhaust, because there's less sound deadening. 8 kilos of sound insulation has been ripped out of the RS6, and that means this thing sounds more mongrel, more mean, more raw than ever before, and that just gives it that much more personality and character. Of course, here on track you've got much more of an ability to get stuck into the car and hear it roar than on the public road, but even at slower speeds you are still getting a massive amount of character, rumble, and just that classic V8 sound. And we've been driving the e-tron GT, the electric Audi, on track today as well, and of course it goes without saying that the RS6 is still giving you a little bit more of that visceral feedback and pleasure through the ears because it's got a sound. The e-tron GT is phenomenally capable and accelerative, but it just doesn't sound like that coming down the main straight at Phillip Island. So from a performance perspective, the RS6 is arguably stronger than ever. The brakes too are impressive. The cars we've been testing have been fitted with the standard package, which have huge 420mm discs at the front, but you can actually further upgrade them to gargantuan 440mm discs if you want the carbon brake package with this car. But given that we've been stopping well all day here at Phillip Island, a really fast track, to be honest, there's not a huge amount of justification for upgrading the brakes unless you want it primarily for bragging rights and also the fact you get to choose different coloured calipers. To be honest, the standard brakes work just fine, even with heavy duty use, such as what I've been doing here today. In terms of the ride handling package, to be honest with you, there wasn't much that needed changing with the RS6. This is still a clearly rear-biased quattro all-wheel drive system in use here, but there have been some changes made, including a retune of the self-locking center differential, and the quattro sport differential on the rear end remains standard here, and you really feel it working hard to channel torque left to right and give you heaps of drive out of corners. And you can seriously drive it out of corners like a lunatic if you want to and induce a lot of oversteer. Up to 85% of the very significant amount of torque produced here can be directed to the rear, and then with the Quattro Sport diff, that can be sent to a specific wheel, left or right, and it's all extremely effective. There is a choice to be made in terms of suspension. These cars have got the adaptive air, and to be honest, it's a really nice blend. It's comfortable on the road, but here on track, you're still getting sensational body control in dynamic. There is a hint of body roll. That's the sort of thing that does get dialed out if you go for the sport suspension on steel springs, but there's a big compromise to be made in terms of compliance on the road, so I'd be sticking with the adaptive air. There are some other minor handling changes, including a move to lighter alloy 22-inch wheels, which saves about 8 kilos of unsprung mass from the car. There's a much bigger unsprung mass saving to be made if you opt for the ceramic brake package, however, which cuts out almost 40 kilos of additional unsprung mass from the car, which would improve dynamics even further. But as I say, there's no palpable reason to go after that. One thing about the latest generation RS6 is that Audi's really tamed the understeery character of previous gen versions of this nameplate. Today, there's been not even a whiff of understeer from this car. Turn-in's neutral. As you'll see, it's definitely more biased towards oversteer on corner exit. We've got tremendous bite from the new specially developed Continental Sport Contact 7 tyres that are fitted as standard as the OE tyre to the RS6. And there's superb mechanical grip from the chassis at all times. One thing you do begin to understand as you push on in the RS6 really quite hard on a fast track like this is that the chassis in this vehicle really talks to you. It starts with the fundamentals of the MLB architecture under this car, and then it goes to expert tuning of the ride, expert tuning of the electric power steering, and especially the stability control. This car talks to you all the time. It gives you options. It communicates with what you're doing. It can be so difficult to remember that there's heaps of room for kids and prams and stuff in the back. This is one serious bit of kit. It already was. The 2024 performance package just makes the RS6 more compelling. Off the track and onto the public road, the Audi RS6 Performance is exactly what you'd want a car like this to be like. Pretty much mild-mannered. The roar of the V8 engine is never too far away, and you've effectively got push-to-pass ability from this incredibly torquey twin-turbo engine and really quick-to-respond 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission, but I wouldn't even say there's an underlying firmness to the ride. If you go with the default air suspension option on the RS6 Performance, it is totally supple, totally compliant, even soft around town. Bumps, potholes, expansion joints are all dispatched with comfort. You could be forgiven for thinking that you were driving around in a regular A6. Not that you can get a regular A6 wagon in Australia anyway. But the point is, the RS6, even in performance guise, is one of the best Jekyll and Hyde cars out there. It has incredible talents to be wrung out entirely on a really fast track like Phillip Island, but it's quite happy being driven in a subtle, quiet, refined manner on the road. That's another thing which really distinguishes the RS6 from a car like the Mercedes-AMG E63. The E63 is similarly fast and competent on sporty roads and on tracks, but it feels pretty highly strung on the public road. It doesn't really like to be driven slowly and carefully, and its ride is pretty stiff and not that comfortable. The Audi manages to do both, making it a pretty rare car in this segment, and of course those virtues are shared by the RS7 Performance if you prefer the sportback form factor, although between the RS6 and the RS7 in Australia, I'm quietly happy to report the wagon accounts for most of the sales. Even refinement is relatively good, although the deletion of some sound deadening in the move to performance does increase road noise, but it also increases the sound of the exhaust, meaning you can hear that V8 engine more often, which is no bad thing. The steering in the RS6 Performance is pretty good, not the last word in feel or feedback, but it's certainly decent, and the fitment of a standard Quattro Sport differential on the rear end is certainly something you can feel when you begin to push on. In terms of safety features, the RS6 is a bit of a breath of fresh air. Because this car was finalised before the latest round of very strict European safety regulations, it doesn't bing and bong at you when you exceed the speed limit accidentally for a couple of moments, and the lane centering is very slickly tuned, not always tugging at the steering wheel. You do have things like a 360-degree camera, AEB in forwards and reverse and at junctions, and blind spot monitoring. So on road and track, those are my impressions of the 2024 Audi RS6 Performance. This continues to be one of the world's great cars. It does strike me that it's probably not likely that we'll have a big V8 RS6 wagon for all that much longer. We know Audi is working on its A6 e-tron sedan and wagon, so I would suggest this car will probably go fully electric in next generation form. So if you've been sleeping on the RS6, you've got $250,000 burning a hole in your pocket and you need a comfy, practical super sports car, check this one out. All right, hit subscribe down below if you want to see more like this. Leave me a comment. Thanks for watching Chasing Cars.